Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Blog Talk Radio.
Well, hi, everybody. I know that you've all been missing me because I've been off the air all week. It's a weird feeling, isn't it? I know it's weird for you guys. It's probably even weirder for me because it's been like 4 days. I'm sure most of you that follow me already know that I had my 2-day film event, obviously, on Wednesday and Thursday in Wisconsin, which is kind of a precursor to my film festival in New York City. So I just want to take a quick second before we start with today's guest is to acknowledge a couple people. Obviously, a 2-day film event doesn't happen without the help of other people. So I do not want to forget to mention real quickly Tom and Miles and PDP and Erico, obviously, of Inspiration Studios. If those of you out there in the Milwaukee area that haven't checked it out, Inspiration Studios is nothing short of fantastic. Theater space. The screening area that we have was phenomenal. It seats up to 65 people. I'll be going there actually to see 12 Angry Men, I want to say, in the next couple of weeks, mid-October, I think it is. So please make it a point to support Erico, Inspiration Studios, all your artists, independent film, of course. Thanks to everybody that helped me make the event, put it together over the course of 2 days, helped me set up films, show up, participate. I cannot thank you enough because obviously you can't have a film event without people. Obviously you can't have a radio show without listeners. So I just wanted to say a really quick thanks, and I want to remind everybody to check the show page this weekend. I am doing one more show. Today's show, tomorrow I'm having a show at 11 o'clock Central Standard Time, and then every day next week with the exception of Wednesday, I'll be on the air. Aren't you all excited? You get to listen to me 4 days in a week. Not really, I'm guessing. But check the show page, check for updates, and everybody will be able to find out who I've got next week. I'm not going to lie to you. I've been home for 1 day, so check my show page. I'll put a nice update on there. So without further ado, let's get Jefferson on the line and start talking to him because you want to listen to him instead of me, right? Hi there.
Hi, Cindy. How are you?
Hello. Oh, I'm nervous.
Yes, can you hear?
I'm really nervous. I'm petrified. Well, you're a pretty intimidating guy. I've seen you. I've watched your interviews. I saw you on television, so I'm like, I have to have my A, B, and C game on this interview today because I don't want to screw this up. This is like really important. So thank you for coming. I mean, thank you for being on the show, obviously. I'm glad that you're here.
Sure.
So we both made it today, so I'm super, super excited. So I've got a bunch of different questions. It is. I want to start off with talking about some of these different things because obviously I've noticed that your view relative to Scientology and other things is a little bit different than other people. So we're going to bounce around a little bit besides talking about the book itself, obviously. I want to start off with something that you do that I find is incredibly noteworthy, which is you've started a blog called Leaving Scientology, which is on WordPress, of course. Talk to the folks a little bit about what inspired you to do something like that and how successful has it been for you?
I left Scientology and I got in touch with a lot of other people who had also left Scientology. And, a lot of people struggle with that. That's kind of a decompression process, as you're sort of getting rid of all the indoctrination. And so I was going through my own journey on that, and I saw other people were too. So I decided to just sort of open it up and start talking about my own journey and sort of leaving it open for people to talk about theirs. And it was a pretty healthy thing to do, I think.
Sure, I imagine so, definitely. And to most of us, obviously, we're kind of on the outside looking in. So for most of us, we haven't been associated with Scientology. We're not familiar with what it's like to be there. So I commend you on that. That's got to be amazing, actually. Do you find that people are a bit apprehensive, or are they open and welcoming to you? You kind of work together with one another. What's that like?
I think, everybody, I think, that has left Scientology is sort of on their own journey. Some people get over it fast and are able to sort of inspect what went on, and other people it takes them quite a while. I think with the amount of books that are out there and TV programs, obviously Leah's show, on A&E.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot faster for people to recover and to sort of see the mind control mechanisms that Scientology uses. And I think it also discourages people from getting involved with it, get an inside look of what's really like.
Sure. Oh, certainly. I imagine. Because we only get, obviously, what, if you've never been involved in Scientology, like the average person like myself, if you're not researching it or watching the show, et cetera, it's all either a matter of you doing internet research, learning all these different things. A lot of us don't even know former Scientologists, obviously. So for us, it's somewhat fascinating, but yet somewhat scary to some of us as well. I understand that originally some of your family members were in Scientology. So was that maybe the precursor or the predominant reason why you started, or was your journey a little bit different?
My brother and sister were both involved. This was back in the late 60s when we got involved. My brother and I got in simultaneously in two different cities. So that was kind of interesting. And then my sister got involved later. So we all kind of got in at the same time.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. And obviously we're into 2017 now, so that was quite some time ago. So I'm intrigued to ask you because obviously, again, most of us, we look at this in a very different light. So there must have been some things about Scientology that were enticing or engaging to you. Could you maybe share with us a little bit about what were some of those main reasons that you wanted to be involved with Scientology in the first place?
Well, of course, this was the late 60s and quite a different world. And I think a lot of young people particularly were looking for some kind of alternate spirituality rather than the traditional religions that they'd grown up in or been indoctrinated in or whatever. They were looking for some kind of an alternate, for a guru or some kind of subject where they could explore spirituality without traditional religious experience, going to church every Sunday and so forth. So there was a lot of that going on in the late 60s, a lot of exploration. And that was at the point where I found Scientology. I was also involved in the anti-war movement, and I was very much anti-Vietnam War at the time.
Sure.
And in Scientology, they were saying, oh, well, we know the reason for war. We know why people are violent. We have all that taped. And if you'll join us and help us spread the message, then we can handle this human tendency to go to war and to be violent and so forth. I thought, oh, that sounds good. That sounds like a good purpose,
Sure.
So
Sure.
I joined up with them,
I gotcha. No, I understand. One of the things that I find intriguing in watching the show and learning about other individuals is, and you've made a quote about this, which means Scientology used to hold a spirit of hope, fun, and adventure. And I thought it was important that you talk about that because most of us that look at Scientology in general have a much different viewpoint, again, based upon just the things we read, learn, et cetera. So share with us what it used to be like. Meaning that statement's pretty powerful when somebody says it used to have this spirit of hope, fun, and adventure. And it sounds to me like you believe now, obviously, that's completely saturated and gone. And tell us a bit about that time, meaning when you believe that to be a true statement.
Yeah, it was true. I mean, when I first contacted Scientology, again, this was end of 1967, the beginning of 68, I went down to their local organization, and it wasn't anything fancy. It was a big old two-story house in downtown LA, but I tell you, it was crammed with people. There were hundreds of people in the lobby, in the course rooms, in the all over the place, and they were all excited and just about this new subject. It was really happening. It wasn't just kids either. I mean, it was young people, old people, and so there was an atmosphere about it that you don't get nowadays because it's changed so much. But if you walk into a Scientology place today, it's empty. There's nobody there. And there's not even a lecturer or anybody to talk to. They sit you down in front of a video player and they have you watch films. So it's very, very sterile and very isolated and very empty right now. But you have to understand, back in the late 60s, it was the happening thing. I mean, celebrities were involved. Hundreds of people were involved. It was really, really an exciting kind of a movement at the time. And it was a lot more, it was a lot looser. It wasn't so controlling as it is these days.
I gotcha. No, I understand exactly what you're saying. Now, I know that you do graphic and web design, obviously, but at one point in time, clearly, I know that you were the marketing architect for Scientology, because, of course, we all remember the volcano ads. Do you ever get tired of hearing that? Like, you're the guy with the volcano ad thing. Does it ever get kind of do you know what I mean, though? Because it's like, do you really want to be synonymous for that? I mean, do you mind that? Because I was like, I don't really want to say the volcano ad guy. But you know what I mean? Because that's what everybody, I think, feels like they identify you with. Do you know what I'm saying?
I totally know. And yeah, and I don't mind talking about it. It's nothing I'm terribly proud of course, because I got a lot of people involved in Scientology, and I regret that, you know. And so that's one of the reasons I'm doing what I do now, and speaking out is to try to reverse all of the proselytization that I did. This was back in the 80s and so on. But yeah, it was a good campaign, and we ended up getting the book back on the New York Times bestseller list after 50 years. 50 years after it was originally published, we got it back on the New York Times bestseller list. So it was an old book. It's hard to read, and it's kind of strange. So I was proud of the fact at the time that I could take an old book like that and pump some life back into it, you know.
No, I totally understand what you're talking about, actually. That's one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because people that are listening in today, I think they have a misconception about certain things, meaning until you do some research on stuff. Like, for instance, I've obviously researched what Dianetic means. And basically, for those that are listening and that may not understand, that the object of Scientology in terms of Dianetics is they believe that it divides the mind into three separate parts. And so it tries to erase content of your reactive mind, which it's a bit confusing for me, I'm not going to lie to you. When you were working with something like this, I guess my question to you is, and some people confuse this subject, so I want you to make this more clear, meaning just because you necessarily put together a marketing campaign for this, were you a firm, solid believer in the concept of Dianetics when you were working with that campaign? Because sometimes people can do a campaign, but they may not necessarily be sold on it. You follow me?
Sure. Well, no, I was a true believer at the time. Absolutely.
Gotcha. Oh, you betcha. Now, if a person walks in today and they say, you know what, I want to explore the theory of Dianetics, of course, because I know that this is where the whole concept of the auditor and all of that good stuff comes in, and making your way to the bridge. And I kind of, again, it's a little bit confusing to the minds that don't necessarily understand that clearly. Have you ever been through the auditing process, or was that any part of, we just want to delve into this a little bit, because obviously, of course, there's a plus and a minus to bringing up too much information. Like when I watch Leah's show, I get a little overwhelmed. So I'm kind of like, I kind of want to give a basic understanding to people listening in, because they're fascinated by this. So who better to ask than somebody that's been involved with this? Meaning, is Dianetics something that's even remotely possibly believable in today's society to be something to subscribe to? Meaning, if one of us, like the average person, wanted to walk in today and say, talk to me about Dianetics, how believable is that?
It always has its appeal. It's not really anything new, Dianetics. I mean, if you go back to Freud, a lot of the concepts were in Freud, but and they talked about talking therapy, where you sit somebody down and you talk to them about their trauma. This is old stuff. This is going back to the 1800s. And that's really what Dianetics is. It's, let's sit down, let's isolate some trauma in your life, and let's talk about it, and let's go through it, and let's relive it a bit, and let's see what we can find out. And I tell you, if you do that, it can be very beneficial, and it can even be exhilarating. I mean, if you've ever had a friend or somebody that you could sit down and talk to, and you were going through something in your life and it was bothering you, and you sat down and just talked to them for, an hour or so, and you come out of that feeling better, That's all Dianetics is. Then they go into it and they say, okay, well, now there's trauma in your past lives that you have to deal with. And okay, so then they start taking you back. Okay, what were you doing in 1860? What were you doing in 17? And they just go back into the past lives. And of course, this is really, I mean, when I was a kid, a kid in my 20s, and I was first getting involved in Scientology, this was pretty exciting to me. Past lives and all that stuff. I mean, I was, kind of amazed at the whole thing, And they presented it in a very believable way, this is what you were doing back then, and so forth and so on. And this is the root of your problems today. And so, it's kind of exciting and exhilarating, and you're getting into all this strange stuff,
Oh, I imagine so, definitely. Now, prior to Scientology, were you a spiritual-based person, meaning did you come from a different faith and then convert over to that? Because, like, for instance, I'm a Catholic, so obviously I've stayed Catholic, and if I were to convert, it would be different. I guess I was just curious to see if you were involved with any other religions prior to this.
Not really. I mean, but my parents were, my mother kind of leaned towards being a Protestant, and my dad's family was Christian Scientists, but I never was involved in any of that. So we were not very religious, but I got interested. I started reading a lot about philosophy and a lot about religion when I was, college age. I was interested in the subject,
Gotcha. Well, of course, I imagine it's fascinating just for people that aren't involved with it, just because of there's so many things that are said about it, et cetera, all the attention that it gravitates and so on and so forth. Now, just to clarify, at this present time, do you ever still work in the marketing field? Because as I understand it, you're more in the graphic, like I said, web design sort of thing. Do you ever do marketing campaigns anymore?
I don't do so much marketing. I'm mainly doing graphic design, web design, SEO, that sort of thing. Obviously having a marketing background helps, but I'm not doing so much marketing these days.
Gotcha. Now, if there's somebody who's
Hello?
Do you have like a specified? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you were cutting out there just for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. If somebody wants to, I was trying to find like a specific website or examples of your work. So if somebody was listening today and they wanted to hire you, do you have a place or a location on social media or otherwise where people can see things you've done?
Sure. My website is skyhawkstudios.com.
Gotcha. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that because that's important, obviously, because you're more than Scientology, obviously, so we want to make sure people have a means to do that. Now, I see that you've landed in Portland, which is interesting because I thought of all the places you could live, oh, look, he chose Portland. And I was thinking, doesn't that sound exciting? So I was just curious. Is that where your family's from? Because I'm like, Portland. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious how you ended up there.
Well, after I left Scientology, I was kind of at loose ends. I spent a couple of years down in Santa Barbara, which is where my mom lived. She passed in 1999. But I went up there and lived in Santa Barbara for a couple of years, was working at a magazine. And then a couple of friends of mine who I had also used to be Scientologists, they invited me to come up to Portland because they needed to hire a marketing person.
Sure.
So I went up. I worked for them for about 6 months, and then I started on my own. Started my own studio.
Very cool. I love that. That's awesome. Now, we want to talk about, obviously, of course, there was one point in time where Scientology lost its luster for you and you decided to leave. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience, What was kind of that pinnacle or that mitigating factor that made you decide that this is just not the place for you to be and you decided to leave?
Yeah. There was a guy that took over the church after Hubbard died, named David Miscavige. And he and I never got along. I think we had different visions of where we wanted Scientology to go. And he was much, much more controlling. So he began to run the church. This was back in the mid-'80s when he started to run the church. And things just got more and more and more abusive, and it became more and more cult-like. And I ended up at the international base in Hemet, California. And it just, I tell you, our phone calls were monitored. Our mail was monitored. We were fenced in with security fencing. We had to get approval to leave. We were being kept up all night. I'll tell you, the last few years that I was there, I was getting an average of 4 hours sleep a night. So it was heavy sleep deprivation, physical punishments, and from Miscavige, it was constant threats and constant verbal abuse and even physical abuse. He beat me up 5 times, because something didn't please him, or he didn't like what I was saying, or he didn't like something I was doing. And there had been abusive people in Scientology before, and I was always like, well, they'll leave eventually, or they'll be discovered and they'll be exposed and they'll be taken out of positions of power. Well, I realized this guy wasn't going anywhere. He had total control over the running of Scientology. He had taken out anybody who was a power threat to him. He had just depowered them, and he actually was holding a bunch of them in a virtual prison. You can read about this, a virtual prison called The Hole at the international base. And they were, they had to sleep on the floor. It was virtual prison conditions. In fact, worse than prison. They would have been better in prison because they would have got more perks. But so I realized at one point that this was not going to change. It was just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. And I was still a believer in Scientology, but I said, I don't care. I don't care if they damn me to hell. I have got to get out of this place. And so I left and went up to Santa Barbara.
Gotcha. Now, just to be clear about this, because, of course, to anyone who may not watch Leah's show, because if you've watched the show, you already know this, but obviously it's not sometimes as simple as, well, it's been nice, folks. I'll see you later. I'm kind of walking out and I'm leaving. I've heard the stories, obviously, that sometimes it can be challenging and you have to literally plan out your escape or plan to be able to leave. In your particular case, were you able to disconnect and walk away and it was easy, or did you have to plan something, or how did you make that move?
Well, they have a procedure. If you want to leave, they have a procedure that you go through. Okay. And I was kept in a fenced compound within the compound and isolated from the rest of the crew there because I had expressed a desire to leave. So they kept me isolated from everybody else, and I was working on manual labor and pretty much shunned by everybody else. And I had to go through hours and hours and hours of what they call security checks to find out anything bad that you've done, any bad attitudes that you have. And they're trying to, I guess, force you to reconsider and stay would be what they would want. But if you don't, they're trying to get as much dirt on you as they can so that if you should leave and speak out, they can trot out all of this dirt that you've confessed to and try to shut you up, which of course is what they do, you know.
Sure, I got that.
So it was about a 4-month procedure that I had to go through, and eventually I was allowed to leave. But a lot of people don't go through that; they just hop the fence, you know.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying. Now, clearly, I know that people talk about this a lot, and in your opinion, I think there is a difference, and I would concur that this is true, that there's a difference between the Scientology itself and the Church of Scientology. I'm wondering if you can kind of differentiate between the two so people can understand that. Or is there a difference? Are they one and the same?
You know, I've had this discussion many, many times, and people tell me that there is a pure subject untouched by human hands that is good. Mm-hmm. But every time it gets touched by human hands, it turns into something negative, in my view. I don't think you can separate out the two. I think that the Church of Scientology is what it is today, which is an abusive group, because they follow Scientology, you know. So I don't think that there's sort of this pure subject that exists somewhere independent of the church. I really don't.
You bet. I gotcha. Now, I know you've said in the past that you are not anti-Scientology. Again, another point that I thought that we should cover, because I just want folks to understand at this point in time today in 2017, you're not anti-Scientology? Or how would you describe you?
Yeah, I'm anti-Church of Scientology, absolutely. I know people, and I have friends who are still doing the auditing procedures on their own outside of the church. And these people I like, these are people I respect. I don't give them any trouble if they take the benign aspects of Scientology, you know, the talk therapy that we were talking about. If they take that and they do that and they try to help people, I'm not going to give them grief about that. I mean, you know, these are good people and they're sincere and they're trying to help other people. And I say, okay, you know, go for it. And as to the weirder beliefs of Scientology, well, you can't give somebody trouble because of what they believe, because I think everybody has got some weird belief that they believe in. And you just can't give them trouble for that. You gotta be tolerant of what people believe.
Of course. No, I understand completely. I do. Now, one of those things that you've done, of course, is you were involved with my Scientology movie. And forgive me, I have not watched that 100%. But I was just curious to ask. I'm assuming he approached you, obviously, to do that, because most people have seen Golden Clear, which is Alex's project, clearly. So tell us a little bit about my Scientology movie for those of us that haven't quite seen the whole thing, and how that's kind of how'd you get involved with that?
Yeah, that was an interesting project. I don't know if you're familiar with Louis Theroux at all.
A wee bit.
He was the star of that movie. He's a British comedian, very straight-faced. You know, I mean, he's the ultimate straight guy, and he will just prod people until they come up with some outlandish statement. He has done all kinds of sort of semi-documentary movies where he does this, and it can be quite funny. So that was what this was about. I mean, my segment isn't particularly funny. I'm just kind of describing what it was like at the end base.
Sure.
But there are other points where particularly where he's interacting with actual Scientologists who are still active. One of whom, interestingly enough, was my ex-wife. So we were both in the movie. She's still involved. She's still involved in Scientology, and her job at the international base is to be the sort of outside PR for the base. So if anybody approaches the base or comes up to the booth or anything like that, she's the one they send to go to talk to them. Well, Louis Theroux came to the base, and she was the one who talked to him. And So that makes for some entertaining bits. And of course, Marty Rathbun is in it, and he's a very controversial figure inside and outside the church. But he was in the film too. But it ended up being very entertaining. I went down to the Ben's Film Festival, and I did a Q&A after the film on the audience, and they were laughing. They thought it was very, very entertaining to talk to some of these people and kind of the crazy things people say.
I imagine, definitely. And now I have to ask you this question only because I did ask Leah Remini to come on the show, and she was too busy this year. Imagine that, folks. She's got a few things going on. So I had to ask you because you've been in her presence, and I can only imagine the first word that comes to mind is, how badass is this woman? So I have to ask you, because you've met her, and I haven't, I'm like, how badass is it to be in a room with her? Is she exactly what we're seeing on television? Because she appears to be very confident and very caring and concerning and very married to this cause, if you will.
Oh, yeah. No, Leah is a total sweetheart. And yeah, she's tough as nails. She has really taken it to the church with this show, and I just admire the hell out of her. I think she is just so strong, so outspoken, and really, really a wonderful person. Can't say enough good about Leah.
That's awesome. I like to hear that, definitely. And I guess one of the questions on our mind, which I'm sure you've participated in the show, I guess our worry is obvious, which is this. Does she have enough to rock the foundation? Because I know that she is one woman. Her and Mike Rinder, of course, are only two people in the grand scheme of things. Do you think maybe they can make a substantial dent here in doing some good in terms of getting things to change?
I think so. This is the most aggressive assault on the church that has ever been. There's no question about that. And the church is running scared. This show is watched by millions of people, and it's really exposing the rotten underbelly of the church in a way that I don't think anybody has ever done before. And she's doing it with stories from actual people who were there and who witnessed what they witnessed and who went through what they went through. So this is not some outside person looking in and saying, oh, they're bad. This is people who were there, who were inside, and who were saying, look, this is what happened. This is what happened to me. So it's very, very powerful.
Well, and one of the things that comes up, which I want to ask you about your own personal life as well as hers, obviously, which is there ever that point in time where you get nervous? Because we hear a lot of stories, of course, about, and I've read it extensively. Journalists go after them. People go after them. Anyone who's considered suppressive, which you are considered suppressive, the church is going to come after you. Do either of you have worries, of course, or legitimate concerns about how severe would they take it to sabotage your lives? Does that ever concern you?
It doesn't. It's obviously a concern for anybody that speaks out, particularly people that were in the church, because they will go after you viciously. Fortunately, that doesn't get to physical attacks or any physical danger, because they're not, they're not at that point. But in terms of verbal abuse, they'll dig up anything in your past or anything that you have confessed in your earlier sessions, and they'll throw it out there. And they have actually created a website for every single person who has been on Leah's show. Every single person gets their own website, and they have video interviews of people who knew them, which are kind of like these North Korean POW videos, the person sitting up there reading off a script, and they'll put up all of these things, these crimes that you're supposed to be guilty of, and they make it as lurid and as exaggerated as possible, of course, So everybody who does the show has to endure this, and fortunately, I don't think anybody reads those sites, and if they do, they certainly don't believe them because it's coming from the Church of Scientology. But still, it's not pleasant to have that kind of an attack launched on you.
You betcha. And in fact, I wanted to mention that. So obviously, I don't know if you know this, you probably do, but Jefferson is considered number 17 on the list of top 25 people that are crippling Scientology. Were you aware of that? You're number 17. I kid you not. I'm a journalist. I know that. And I was like, I wonder if he knows that.
Well, you know who I would put as number one on that list of the top person who is destroying Scientology is the current leader, David Miscavige.
I was just
I think he has done and is doing more to destroy Scientology than anyone else.
Well, and the other thing, too, is I noticed, I found it interesting, not that I'm surprised, but your book actually is on a list. It's a forbidden reading list for Scientology members, meaning if you're in Scientology right now, they are forbidden from reading your book. Not that that shocks me, of course, but does that bother you at all?
Well, no, that's totally expected. But you would be surprised at how many email messages that I get from people who tell me that reading my book caused them to leave science.
Wow.
So they do read it.
Sure.
It's totally forbidden. It's totally forbidden. They are not supposed to. But, once a person starts looking and starts asking questions and reading things, they're gone. They're gone.
Sure.
And there are a lot of Scientologists who are officially, they're still a Scientologist. The church considers them Scientologists, but they're kind of backing away from it, and they're not doing anything overt. They're not criticizing the church. They're not speaking out. Nothing like that, but they're just slowly backing away at this point.
Sure. Oh, no, I understand completely. I do. One of the things that I've read about you, and folks, if you don't know this, obviously, what we were talking about 5 minutes ago, which is there's been tons of rumors about you, meaning professional malfeasance, unethical conduct. There's things that are said about you all the time, including this oppressive word. So how do you deal with that, with this fabrication and such? Do you find yourself having to defend your character, or do you find that it's less of an issue now and you can kind of shrug it off because people are like, yeah, whatever, we've heard this, blah, blah, blah? Meaning, is it a serious dent to you? Because I don't know how you live like that. Frankly, I'd be tore up by that. I mean, that's got to be really tough.
I just ignore it,
Okay.
I just ignore it. They're a small cult. Nobody listens to them. Nobody believes anything they say anyway. So, I say let them yammer away. Let them say whatever they want about me. I don't care. And frankly, I don't think anybody else does either.
It's a good point, actually, as a matter of fact. I wanted to bring this point up because I was digging through this, and this is what I don't understand. And I'm not an idiot. I'd like to think I'm very intelligent. But I understand that if you're a Scientologist, you are not allowed to have Internet access for members. So here I was trying to figure this out because I'm thinking, okay, if someone's bashing Scientology and you have no access to the Internet, how do they know that you're doing that? Is that a dumb question?
No, not at all. And it's really not that they don't have access. I mean, if you're working for Scientology at the international base like I was, you can't get on the Internet. And in fact, I had to be on the Internet for my work. So I was allowed to be on a terminal that literally had a camera pointed at the screen. And if I went to the wrong websites, they would just nab me. It was just, and the feed went to a security booth. So if I was online, boy, I was being watched. So it's very, very restricted for the staff at the international base. The rank and file Scientologist who has a job, he's working out in the world, he has a family and so forth. He can go on the Internet. Obviously, he can do whatever he wants on the Internet.
Sure.
But if he visits an anti-Scientology site, when he next goes in for his auditing, he has to confess all that before he can proceed with his auditing. And you could say, well, why don't they just keep it a secret? Well, believing Scientologists you don't think you have any secrets, and you believe that the electrometer that you're hooked up to can read you, can tell when you're lying, can tell when you're hiding something. And so the person who's operating the meter just says, okay, what was that? What was that? You have something. You're hiding something. And then they have to confess it. Okay, I looked at the site and so forth. Okay, then they have to go through what's called ethics conditions. They have to make amends to the organization. They have to pay money to get remedial auditing. It's a hassle. They get threatened with being disconnected from their family and their friends and so forth. Nobody wants that. They don't want that, So they stay away from those sites because they know that if they go there, they're just going to be in so much hot water with the church. I mean, a lot of people do anyway, but there's that scare factor.
You bet. Now, you mentioned earlier in our conversation that obviously having some large regrets in terms of some of the things in the past. Have you been able to reconcile that with yourself? Are you at some sort of peace at this point with everything that's transpired?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's taken me years, but I'm very much at peace with it. And I don't think about it all that much anymore. I mean, I used to be obsessed with going after them and exposing everything, and I still do that, and I'm still quite active in it, but it takes up maybe 5% of my time in an average day. And,
I understand.
So I've kind of moved on in a lot of ways.
You betcha. And then I make you come on my show and talk about this. Ha ha. Well, it's because there's important reasons for it.
Always happy to do that. Always. Yeah.
I love that. We have to talk about your books. But one of the things you brought up, which I think is really important, because I have talked to two of the other cast members that were on the show, and they were on the show specifically talking about the disconnection. So I want you to talk about a little bit. I don't think people really fully understand this whole again, I'm a Catholic. I can't even imagine a religion or so-called religion or whatever making me disconnect from my family. So what I'm trying to have an audience understand is, what is the purpose? What is their real purpose for asking or making you literally disconnect from your family? What's the reasoning for that? I guess I struggle with that quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the real reason for any kind of shunning. And every cult in the world does shunning. There's some form of shunning or dismembership or anything. They call it different things. But obviously the real reason is to keep them in a bubble and to not have the members infected with any kind of negative viewpoint or any criticism of the leader or anything like that. The stated reason, here's what they tell the members. They say, if you are involved somebody who is critical of Scientology, who's critical of the auditing processes and so forth, then that will affect your gains in Scientology. That will affect your progress in Scientology. And you cannot progress in Scientology if you are connected to one of these negative people. So you have to disconnect for your own good, because you want to have some good progress and some good wins in Scientology. So this is for your own good that you have to disconnect. And of course, if you refuse to disconnect, well, then you are one of those negative people, and everybody else in the church will have to disconnect from you. So that's how they enforce it, and it is enforced very strictly.
Look at that. Yeah, because that's one of the biggest things, and I know that I see that a lot, and it's heartbreaking for most of us to watch, because clearly any organized religion should never come to a point where they're doing things like that. I mean, separation of family is a huge thing, and I see how it tears apart at these hearts, and it's just heartbreaking to watch, really, truly.
Oh, it is.
It's devastating, and I can't even imagine living in a world where you're forced to have to do this on a regular basis. It just seems wrong on so many levels, I have to say.
Yeah.
So now, in relative to, I don't know if most people know this, but I know you've done Counterfeit Dreams, but you also did two other books, Leaving Scientology and Closing Minds. Let's talk about those two first. what, in essence, obviously, when you first start out and you want to write a book about Scientology, I imagine that takes years of research and time. I mean, obviously, I know you lived it, but did you talk to other people?
Mm-hmm.
Did you, was this a tedious task? Not that you didn't want to do it, but meaning you have to really be on point with your stuff, right? Because I imagine if you're not, they're going to come after you like wolves. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. After I left Scientology, I tried a lot of times to write something about my experience, and I just could not get anything down on paper. I was confused. I didn't know what had happened to me. Anyway, about 3 years after I left, I started a blog. This was not my Leaving Scientology blog. It was called Counterfeit Dreams, and I just started telling my story from the beginning. And I went to England, and I did this, and I did that. And a lot of people who had been in Scientology started reading it. And a lot of my friends who had been with me at the international base started reading it. And then I would get, a lot of comments like, well, that wasn't in 1982, that was in 1983, so there was a lot of sort of ongoing fact-checking that was going on in this.
Sure.
And so over the period of about a year, I told my whole story, and I had, hundreds of people following this, episode by episode, as it were. And then when I finished it, I had a lot of people say, you should turn this into a book. So I expanded it probably by 50% and included a lot of other material and published that as Counterfeit Dreams. And that's my book. It's really the story of my whole journey in Scientology, beginning in the late 60s and going up to the point where I left.
Now, in Closing Minds, I know that you speak about the ethics technology, meaning how they use that to control their members. So give us a bit of a bird's eye view, because some of us have never heard the term ethics technology. So what exactly is that, and how in depth do you get into that in terms of in your book?
Well, it's how they control their members, and I didn't fully realize this until I had left, and I realized that this was the way that they kept their members under tight control, and it's a pretty complex subject. It starts out sounding benign. They say, well, we all have to live ethical lives, and we have to be honest, and and it's important to forward the goals of Scientology and this and all that. It sounds very good. Oh yeah, we're all behind that. We can do that.
Sure.
And then it gets into, well, if you step over the line, and if you violate any of these things, then here are the steps you have to go through to get back in the group, and it gets into security checking and conditions and the various justice procedures that you have to go through if you step over the line, and on and on and on. And you realize, if you read this stuff, that this is mind control. This is a sophisticated system of mind control. And so I wanted to go through this whole book, step by step, and expose each of the mechanisms. And that was why I wrote Closing Minds. Originally, it was a series of articles for Tony Ortega's blog, and then I turned that into an e-book just to put it all in one place.
I imagine. And of course, out of all three books, because obviously you authored all three, and I've written books myself, so I always like to ask the author, which one of them is closest to your heart, do you think? Which one was your one where you're like, yeah, this is the one that I love and adore? Not that you don't like all of them, but you know what I mean?
Well, I think my autobiographical book is, of course, my favorite, because that's very, very personal to me. And that really is all about the journey that I went through, into the belly of the beast and back out again. So that to me is the one that will always be my favorite.
And now we have to look at after effect, which is here we are at the here and now today. So, of course, your loved ones, the people around you, yourself, that's got to be difficult, you know what I mean? Because, now do you have, it was unclear in my research whether you had children or if you are currently married, et cetera, so I wasn't quite sure how to brace the topic of, well, how does your family react to all this? Because I'm not sure that you have an actual wife, children, et cetera. So how does your family react to that, assuming that you have one, Jefferson?
Well, my first wife, who was a Scientologist, had a daughter, not my biological daughter, but I became her dad when she was just a few months old. And so she always considers me her real dad. She lives down, my daughter lives down in San Francisco area. And she has two kids, my wonderful grandkids. My grandson is 10, and my granddaughter is 18, big girl, a young woman.
Wow.
And my brother, who was in Scientology, and he got out a year or so after I did. They were telling him he had to disconnect from me, and he told them to go to hell, basically, and left the church, for which I will eternally be grateful to him. Anyway, he and his wife live out in Eastern Oregon, and they have three wonderful kids. My niece, who lives close to me here in Portland, and she has two kids, my grandniece and my grandnephew, both little toddlers. And my brother's two sons, my nephews, also live in Portland. So we get together all the time. The kids were never really into Scientology. So, they knew about the involvement. When they were little kids, their mom and dad were still in Scientology. And, of course, my daughter was in up to about the age of 10. We all know the history, We all know the history, and we talk about it.
I imagine. Well, and plus, too, obviously, this is the sort of thing where you're at the here and now, so I'm guessing that you want to live your life as the here and now, meaning that, obviously, Scientology is one part of your life, but it's not in the part and the parcel of who you are completely, clearly. And, of course, there's good memories and bad memories with everything, clearly. So I have to ask you, of course, the hot button questions, which everybody wants to ask, but no one's going to get a chance to ask, so I'm going to ask them because I can and we're here. So I'm like, there's two hot subjects that everybody wants an opinion on. So, of course, I have to ask you just your personal opinion on this, of course, certainly, because there's a lot of talk, and Leah Remini has talked about her too. Shelley Miscavige, where is Shelley Miscavige? So I'm just curious your take on that. This is just an opinion question because, like I said, there's a lot of hoopla and a lot of talk, and well, as a citizen, I'm just genuinely concerned. She seems to be incognito completely. And, she is David Miscavige's wife. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I knew Shelley. I mean, a lot of people thought she was pretty cold and heartless, and maybe I saw a different side of her, but I always liked Shelley. I didn't think she was a bad egg at all. Anyway, this was after I left Scientology. I left in 2005. And I think later that year, she fell afoul of her husband in some way. She took some action that made him unhappy. And so one day she just disappeared. She was not at the meetings anymore. She wasn't copied on any of the memos. And, if you're at that base, you don't ask questions. Somebody disappears, you're just like, oh, okay. But she was just gone. And I've talked to a lot of people who were around her and who know more than me than what went on, but apparently she was sent to a remote Scientology base in the San Bernardino Mountains, their crest line. And she does some kind of work there, but she's not allowed to leave the premises there. It's a forest area, and they have a fenced compound up there. And she's not allowed to leave that area, so she's being held to virtual prisoner up there.
Prisoner.
And again, when I say prisoner in terms of Scientology, it's quite often a mental prisoner.
Sure.
She's sort of trapped by her own beliefs up there. And then people say Shelley's missing. We don't know where she is. No, they know where she is. They know exactly where she is. She's up there being held in that compound. Yeah.
Well, and that brings us to the biggest question, because I just had a huge controversy. Because, of course, I am active on social media, and this is one of my big push buttons is Scientology. And so I put a poll out there, and I asked people this question. So, of course, because you used to be involved, the statement's been made numerous occasions where if one of the highest-ranking Scientology members were to leave tomorrow, the church would crumble. So I'm just curious to get your take on if you believe that if Tom Cruise had left Scientology tomorrow, that things would look very differently, or they would, in essence, fall apart.
I don't think they're going to fall apart. They've got a big war chest. So I don't think that any one person leaving, even Cruise, I don't think that's going to make the thing collapse. It's sort of a facade anyway. They're propping themselves up by purchasing a lot of buildings and trying to look big, but it's pretty much hollow inside. It's kind of a bubble, So they can maintain that facade for a long time because they've got billions stashed away, and they have a lot of people who are giving them millions of dollars. They court these whales that give them a lot of money, including Cruise. So yeah, it would be a huge blow to the church if he ever left. Personally, I don't think he is ever going to. Unfortunately.
That's kind of what I thought. Yeah, there's always been that debate going on, of course, because obviously the Scientology attracts celebrities, and we all know why that is, obviously, because if you've done any amount of research or followed it all, you know why celebrities are so enticing to the Church of Scientology, which has been discussed numerous amounts of times. I don't want to forget to mention this. This gentleman we've been talking to has been on Anderson 360, ABC Australia, KESQ. He's been on Lee's show. We mentioned my Scientology movie. Let me just mention a few things that have been said about your books. He's brought tears to the faces of actual Scientologists, which I think says a lot. His books are very poignant and powerful and have been done so very professionally. And then it's been said of you that you tell a very gripping yet disturbing story as an excellent writer. So when you hear things like that, are you most satisfied, or was there one primary thing you wanted to do with these books that you've managed to accomplish?
Well, I think, initially it was to help other people recover from Scientology, but the secondary purpose, which is really the main purpose now, is to make it known what Scientology is really like on the inside and to discourage people from getting involved with it, and I think it's doing a lot in terms of that.
Gotcha. Well, my final two questions before we go through the business thing is this. I actually did not know this, but there is a church. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so there's an actual Church of Scientology here, which is what they call it. So I went to visit there the other day. And, of course, no one was there. Imagine that, even though they said they were going to be there. I also did not know that Ron Miscavige lives in Wisconsin. See, now most people don't know that. Literally found that out. Yeah. He did the West Dallas, Wisconsin Library did an actual, he did the book, and so, of course, I didn't realize he actually physically lives here. So one of my friends asked me this the other day, so this is a good question for you. So my one friend was like, now, if Ron Miscavige lives in Wisconsin, he's got to have Scientologists that are following him here in Wisconsin. So I guess that's my question to you, because you were involved in this. Do you think it's possible that they're, actually stalking him because he is who he is? Even though, do you know what I'm saying? Because obviously he's out, et cetera. Yeah. But what do you think the likelihood of that is?
They're definitely keeping an eye on him. They're definitely keeping an eye on him. Mainly because of who he is. He's the father of the leader. And David, his son, is very paranoid. So I know for a fact that he's doing pretty much everything he can to keep track of his dad.
Gotcha. That's kind of what I thought. Okay, so my other question to you is this. A lot of people talk about the fact that they are so offended or so bothered by Scientology, et cetera. So as a regular layperson, somebody who's not a journalist, somebody who's just listening in today, if people want to do something to help, can they? Do you know what I mean? I feel like they feel like there's a lot of bad going on, but they feel helpless to help. Make sense? So I'm just asking you, do you think there's anything the average person, can they do anything?
Well, I think just spread the word, tell people about Leah's show, tell people about the books that are available on it and so forth. And, you know, if you want to do some sort of activism, write to your congressman, your senator, and ask them to question Scientology's tax exemption as a religion. You know,
oh my God, that's right.
We need to get public pressure going on that.
You betcha.
You know.
Without a doubt. Okay. Now, I don't want to forget to mention a couple things. Obviously, you've done Blog Talk Radio before, but just as a reminder to anybody who follows you, in about 2 hours, this episode is going to be archived, so anybody can go back and listen to it at any time. Just as an ironic twist, just so you know, somebody called in while we were doing this interview on an anonymous line, and I thought about answering it. Now, I guess I should have asked you, did you want me to answer it? Because it was an anonymous number, and I thought to myself, do you really think somebody would call in and try to trash talk you? I was really nervous about that. I was like, should I pick that up? Well, you know what I mean? It's an anonymous number, and I'm going to find out. I'm going to try to find out who it was after the fact. But, I mean, doesn't that seem odd? It was weird, too. It's like, oh, my God, there's an anonymous call. Do they do that?
It's happened before. Yeah. No, it's happened before. I've had people call in and say, no, he's lying about everything. It was wonderful at the end base, and it was paradise. And, and these are people I know, and I'm like, come on, you know.
It's exactly right. That's why I figured it's probably best not to answer that, but that was a freaky coincidence. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, so before I read off all the ways where people can find you, you're the best guy to ask this to because I hear this a lot because obviously I'm a longtime journalist and I'm also a filmmaker, and one of the things that I've thought about tremendously long is I'd like to do a project on Scientology and film. And so anytime I talk about this, in fact, I have a film festival next month, and I was going to screen Going Clear and ask the Church of Scientology to attend. Why? Because I'm very much like Leah in that I kind of am just like, yeah, well, here I am, and I got a big mouth, and what are you going to do about it? Now, there are many people that know me and love me that say, you need to leave them Scientology people alone. So who better to ask than my current guest? If I was a smart woman, I'm sure you would tell me if I'm in over my head, right? Because this would be a good question for you. So this is my intention. My intention is to shoot a film relative to this subject matter. I guess my question to you is, are my friends warranted in freaking out and thinking, oh my God, our friend's going to be dead or da-da-da-da-da? I just want to be very clear about this, and who better to ask?
Yeah. I mean, generally what I tell people is that Scientology has bigger problems than the random person who speaks out in the public. They have major critics like Mike Rinder and others who are exposing the inner core of what Scientology is about. So, and seriously, they don't have the resources to go after everybody. They have an office that does that sort of thing, Office of Special Affairs. It's understaffed. and working to try to deal with all of the negative publicity that's going on, which is huge. So they're overworked, understaffed. They're not going to come after you. You know.
Did you hear that, folks? So all those people that were like, oh, you got to leave them alone. I'm like, yeah, right. I'm really not that worried. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, obviously, when I went to the office, I was kind of looking around, and I'm like, I wonder if they have cameras here and stuff. Folks, I'm telling you, I don't know what it's like over by you guys, but they have – you can see it right in the window. Literally, it was closed, but they're free personality testing and free this and da-da-da-da, and there's a picture of L. Ron Hubbard in the office. And so it's literally a take from what you would see. I mean, a much smaller version than the church in California or other places, but you know, it's kind of freaky. You know, it makes me sad to think about the fact that so many people are affected by this. And so, you know, yeah. So there you go, folks. I'm doing what I'm going to do. Let them come after me. That's all I'm saying. Kind of, sort of. There you go. All right. So let me read through these. Just to find our guest today, his name is Jefferson Hawkins, just so you guys know. These are all the following places to find him. The website itself is counterfeitdreams.com. He has an IMDb profile. He's on Amazon, YouTube, Goodreads, Pinterest, Kindle, LinkedIn. The blog we were referring to is leavingscientology.wordpress.com, which is the blog about leaving Scientology. Skyhawkstudios.com, which is, of course, for his graphic design work. And also he's on Twitter, which is @RealJeff, and that's JEF. Oh, it is Jeff Hawkins.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Any other place to find you or anywhere else? Or in particular, if somebody wants to meet you.
Well, if anybody's in Portland or wants to come to Portland, yeah, just contact me. There's an email on the Leaving Scientology blog that they can use to contact me, which is that's how people contact me regarding Scientology. So yeah, if you're in Portland or you're coming to Portland, I'd love to have lunch with anybody.
That's awesome. That sounds terrific. Okay, so the last part of my show is always the best part, I call it, which is the part where I get to tell my guests what I think of him or her. In this case, you're a him. The reason I do that is because this is not the scripted part of my show. This is the only thing that I don't write, and I think it's important to give personal impressions, and you probably don't hear this very often. So let me just say this much to you, Mr. Jefferson. Unfortunately, the first time we did this interview, I showed up, and you, unfortunately, were unable to. So I was talking to myself for a while, and I'm like, darn it, I really want to get this guy on my show. So I've done enough research about this man, and I've looked at him enough to say he has this, I think you have an inner hippie spirit. I was looking at that, and I'm like, that's one of the first things that appealed to me was you look like a very inner, outer hippie, so to speak. I think one of the things that was so curious for me in interviewing you wasn't so much about Scientology, was more so about finding out how you were coping and living as a person after the fact. So let me say this much about you. One of the things that I find most impressive is the fact that you have lived to tell a tale and that you've taken your trials and tribulations and you've turned them into success. And by success, what I mean is you're touching the lives of other people who have been in a bad spot or have been in the same place as yourself, and you've turned something bad into something good, which is remarkable. The fact that you've survived all of this, you should be commended for that. I know that you probably carry a tremendous amount on your soul and on your shoulders. Many of us admire you for the fact that you're so courageous, that you're able to come out and tell your story without fear and without shame. I think that's very impressive. Nowadays, not everybody's out there and doing the right thing, so I commend you for doing that. I feel very honored that you came onto my show today. I am going to come to Portland. I don't know when because I have to go to New York, but I will be coming there, and I will look you up because I want to shake your hand in person. Also, I will knock on your door when I put this film project together. I think it's important to incorporate people that have survived, that have told tales, that have written stories. I think that you will have a legacy somewhere down the line when people look at Scientology and they see some of the people that have left influential marks in a good way. I think your name will not always be associated with negative. I think it will be associated with hope and help, and I hope that you realize that, truly.
Well,
that's what I think of you, Mr. Hawkins. You're quite welcome, and I'm glad we were able to do that. Come back on the show anytime you would like, certainly. Like I said, I'll send you off the link. I also put all of my shows onto YouTube, so those will be accessible as well. And like I said, don't be a stranger. Anytime you want to come on and promote something, I'd be more than happy to talk to you. And now that I know that you do graphic design, I'm sure I'll reach out to you because I need something done next year because I'm starting a magazine. So you'd be great to do something like that. So that would be awesome. So great. Well, wonderful. Thank you, dear. You enjoy your day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you very much, Cindy.
All right. Take care, dear. Bye-bye. Tell me that wasn't fabulous, right? And tell me it wasn't a little eerie with the whole call-in with the anonymous thing. Yeah. I'm not going to dwell too much on that because I don't have time for that business. But one more time, let me remind everybody, the amazing Jefferson Hawkins, the ways to find him. CounterfeitDreams.com is the website. Again, he is on Amazon, LinkedIn, IMDb, YouTube, Goodreads, Pinterest, Kindle, leavingscientology.wordpress.com, as well as skyhawkstudios.com. And, of course, again, the Twitter is Real Life Jeff Hawkins. Again, huge thanks to Jefferson for making this happen. I appreciate it. And I can't even imagine what it's like to come out and speak about such a time in your life as far as that goes. So my big thanks to him. Obviously, of course, my big thanks, even though I've never met you, Leah Remney, for doing the work that you do. You, along with Mike Render and all the other participants on the show, are making a change and a positive change, and we appreciate that. I want to leave you folks with a sentiment with this show, which is the actual physical definition of a cult is a religious sect generally considered to be false or extremist, with its followers often living unconventionally under the guidance of an authoritarian leader. Make no mistake in listening to the show today. Hopefully you've been convinced that that is indeed the actual definition of Scientology as a whole. Scary stuff, folks. So keep in mind, as you heard, I will be doing a film project on this. I will also be doing, hopefully, the screening in New York City. We'll see how that goes. I'm still waiting to get word on that as far as that happens. So join me tomorrow for my interview at 11 o'clock Central Standard Time. Check the show page. I apologize for not knowing specifically, but I think it's a to be determined right now. So I'm on air tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And again, next week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday as far as that goes. So thanks so much to everybody listening in today. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Take care.